Welcome to the Filmistines, the double feature podcast. Join us as we unravel the interwoven experience of the continuous conversation of cinema. If you like what you hear, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Filmistines. Come right in, come request a film, grab some popcorn, sit back, and get ready to join the 100-year conversation. This is the Filmistines, where movies are more than just entertainment, they're an experience.
They're an experience.
All around you. And welcome back to another episode of the Filmistines. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today I am joined by a clown of a friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
Remember, you can join us every Monday and Friday for brand new episodes of the Filmistines on all of our free feeds, and every other Wednesday on patreon.com/Filmistines for Patreon exclusive episodes. Some recent episodes include the original Beetlejuice, the new Borderlands, the 2016 Suicide Squad, the 1998 Happiness, and the recent Kinds of Kindness from our boy, Yargos. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come right in. Go subscribe to our YouTube. Rate us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys for all that very much. But today we will be talking about Todd Phillips' 2019 film, Joker. Of course, we have to watch the first Joker in preparation for the sequel that is upon us. I just wanted to start off by saying that I enjoy this film very much, but I have this sneaking suspicion that if it was to come out today, it would be shat all over. There's a weird political air around this film that I don't completely understand, and I find largely baseless, but if you have something to say about that, I would love to hear it. But I love this angle of something we have sort of seen before, of taking a very serious approach to, I guess, a comic book scenario. And my favorite thing about this film is it feels like this defense against the Martin Scorseses of the world, and saying that the Marvels of the world, Marvel films, and its cousins are not real cinema type thing. I'm not sure when Martin Scorsese said that exactly, but I do find it poetic to obviously have somewhat of an homage to two of his films, King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, and obviously more of an homage than maybe a ripoff because of its self-awareness and execution with Robert De Niro. Joaquin Phoenix obviously gives a wild performance, and I think it does mask some of the one-note nature of this film. I think upon first viewing, this film can really have an effect on someone, but after watching it a few times, it loses that luster, and on some level, I think starts to prove Martin Scorsese is correct. The Martin Scorseses of the world being correct. At least in the Joker's suggested defense. But I like this film a lot. Even after all these years, Joaquin Phoenix is a favorite. What did you think of 2019's Joker?
I think this is an amazing movie. I saw this movie at the movie theater when it first came out, and I remember loving it. And rewatching it again, I think it's still an amazing movie. And even more of an amazing movie now that I have a little bit of movie watching experience. We're dealing with a very classical villain, the Joker, and not quite as he's ever been seen before. If you've been following us, you know we love our unreliable characters. We love to bring up Salieri, and now we can bring up someone like Forrest Gump, which is on the opposite side of Salieri's point of view, but still as unreliable. And the Joker is an unreliable character, which I love this. He has some mental issues going on. He's got this very skewed worldview. But we have this character that is a very traditional villain that we managed to humanize, which is really amazing because we care so much for him in this movie. And how did this film manage to do that? How does it make us sort of root for this murderer? And even at the end, when he commits this horrendous act, it's comical and almost welcomed in a way. It's just crazy how it can make you feel like that. You said this movie has this political air thing going on, and I feel it. The background of this film is the sanitation or the garbage strikes from the 80s, especially the very popular ones in New York. And it's setting these underlying tones to the film. The battle these coworkers have versus the city, to me, represents many kinds of battles going on in people's lives. And it almost stresses or adds this importance to minute workers or the little guys. Because whoever thinks the sanitation crews, the janitors, the cleaning guys aren't important, you should think again. And I think this movie is trying to give a little bit of that message. This is probably one of my favorite Joaquin movies. He's an amazing actor, no doubt about that. And not that the Oscars are the be-all, end-all to determine the amazingness of a director, of a film, of an actor, etc. But this film won him an Oscar, and there's some merit there. The physical transformation he did for this movie is crazy. And that's something everyone does like to discuss, even himself. But that laugh was insane. The dancing, the facial expressions. I mean, he did such a phenomenal job on this role. And I don't know if it's just me, but he sort of has this nice voice to listen to. And I'm not sure if I brought that up in our Brother Bear episode or not. And I don't know how I didn't know that that was him, because his voice is just so distinct. But that voice of his gives him some vulnerability that I really like in this movie. And it helps set this tone to the movie that I can't quite get over. And even though this movie is set in the 80s, it feels very Depression era. It makes you kind of sad. It makes you kind of vulnerable and exposed. And everything going on to the movie just adds to that feeling.
I like your pull at Arthur being this sort of representation of folks on Skid Row and ultimately how society leaves them in the dust, forgets about them. But when I mentioned the political era around this film, I'm speaking specifically about the conversation around this film and how it's targeted and being a player in the race wars. But your poll is much more interesting because it is substantiated by the film and grounds the film ultimately. Because I'm going to tell you what this film kind of makes me feel like, what it's kind of trying to say and represent ultimately. And that is, this film is deeply charged with this teen angst of just wanting to be done with it all. It kind of reminds me of the hysteria you hear about sometimes maybe in your life or on TV or something, and how you might say to, I guess, the wrong person, because you're just trying to find some kind of relief in saying that, I think about killing myself sometimes or hurting myself. And there's some built-in relief in saying that, but the other person then is very hysterical and does something about it, right?
It calls the cops, and now you're hospitalized on suicide watch.
And now it's all of a sudden escalated to a strange point that was just never
right
in hand. It just got out of hand. Because I think the obvious major theme through the film is society creates villains, right? And this film obviously came to ultimately represent the misunderstood individual. That's why you see all across the board, I guess, this is my Joker, Brother Bear is my Joker, whatever.
Is that what people say?
Yeah.
Ah.
You see that all over the place about, usually referred to when there's a misunderstood character, they'll be like, Poor Things is my Joker. I don't know.
Interesting. I kind of would have thought that's more like my moment that I went crazy. If someone's going to reference a moment as a Joker moment. But, okay.
No, that would just be your villain origin. Yeah. Which I don't think we have so much here, because I think this movie does little to establish its Joker, Arthur, as a real future villain, which is good. But I also think holds the movie back, because we constantly have to remind ourselves, the audience, that, oh, this is a Batman movie, don't forget.
Does it, though?
Yes, in the worst ways possible, because remember, Arthur is Bruce's brother. Arthur's mom had a fling with Mr. Wayne, Senior Wayne.
But she didn't.
The suggestion is enough to totally cripple this film, I think, in that way. Because we constantly have to remind the audience that this is a Batman film. And we play it sort of softly because we also don't call this man the Joker. We call him a Joker.
Yes.
Murray names him a Joker because he's a clown.
But I think that's so fun.
And if we could have kept it at this referential state, that would have been pretty sick. And I think would have helped Todd Phillips' case of, instead of saying that superhero movies are movies too, that superhero movies are made up of real movies kind of thing. You know what I mean? But instead, we had to tether ourselves to these deeply inconsequential story beats to give reason maybe to why Arthur is the way he is, but that is sort of antithetical to the ultimate point of society creates the villain. We have to keep bringing up the Waynes. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I don't know if we bring them up enough that it gets in my way.
It's not distracting to you?
It's not distracting to me, and we kind of use them as McMuffins to get him going, to get him thinking, because, for example, when he goes to Daddy Wayne and he's like, hey, you're my daddy, he's like, no, I'm not, your mom's crazy, she adopted you, or I don't know what he said. It kind of led Arthur to go investigate some more and go to the mental institution to find the records, to find out more about his mom and find out he's been lied to his whole life. Because the only one that I can kind of think that was not as important and maybe not necessary for the film, but I could see it being like, hey, this is Bruce Wayne right here, this little child, is that scene when Joker goes to the gate and he sees the boy, Bruce, and he's like showing him magic tricks and whatnot, and someone approaches the gate and it's like, you need to get out of here. He's like, no, I'm in on the secret. I know Daddy Wayne is my dad, and this is my brother. Like, we're cool here. But then he gets sent away. But that scene is so small, and I haven't quite depicted it, but I could see maybe that scene being completely unnecessary and just wanting to show us that Bruce Wayne is a little kid that exists in this world. Because we don't make the Joker, like you said. We just make him a joke with nods to the Joker we all know and love.
Which is part of my problem, because he is sort of this representation of something bigger than just a villain. He's the bottom of the barrel, most toxic kind of product of what society poops out in the worst places. Arthur is nothing more than the ultimately disturbed. He's not the Joker, and so I struggle to see the point outside of the McMuffin as far as plot-wise. I get that, but the catalyst isn't enough to marry the two ideas, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. And it might be one of these things where either you like it or you don't. Similar to making The Color Purple a musical. You know, The Color Purple is not a musical. Okay, some people liked it. Some people liked the music going on with everything else. So maybe it's one of the situations where this doesn't need to be a Joker movie. Yeah, it doesn't. But I think it's so fun that it is. And to kind of have this character that I know all of a sudden be humanized.
I appreciate that, and it's kind of funny because you make me think he kind of justifies both camps. He confirms to this Martin Scorsese's of the world that you can't have a superhero movie without having these awkward kind of forced beats, but also the superhero fans, the Joker fans, the DC fans are justified in that we can have real serious movies.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just look at the Joker.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of funny. But the unreliable character nature of this film is unmatched. They all are once they reach, this kind of caliber. Salieri is similarly kind of unmatched simply in the narrative structure of that film because he's telling it.
Yes.
And that's wonderful.
It's awesome.
And here we get more of a real-time perspective from a super unreliable character. And I like you bringing up Forrest Gump because I think it's very similar in that way, in that the whole world is skewed towards Arthur Fleck's messed up point of view. Similar to Forrest Gump. Everything's beautiful and gentrified and clean in Forrest Gump's head because he's an idiot.
Positive, yeah.
Tomato, tomato.
Tomato, tomato.
And one thing I really like in Arthur's world is that it seems like every job is a performative job. We have our clowns, we have our Murrays in the audience, we have the people on TV he watches, Thomas Wayne. No one's doing regular jobs, right? I can't remember if we hear about the garbage strikes or not.
Yeah, we hear them on TV as news people are telling us about them. And then I think Murray brings up several jokes about the garbage strikes.
Got you. So it only really kind of confirms that Arthur sees everything through performance. Everything is a performance. Everyone is a player, an actor in this bigger picture. That's obviously a dream for his. Everyone else is on Skid Row, is living in the slums. And even people living in the slums are also performers because, his clown friends. So I love this warped perspective on the world. Of course, it reminds me of everyone who stays at home too much and spends their days in front of a TV, in front of a screen, and forms this really strange, not necessarily an echo chamber, but along the lines of this really distorted view of the world that builds major divides between us. Because mind you, when we see two actors, Arthur and maybe Bruce, for example, there's a gate between them. There's this big divide between them. It substantiates the rest of the film, kind of against what I was saying earlier. I guess my point about including the Bruce thing is it's distracting more than anything else.
Yes, this perspective, or this skewed perspective that Arthur Fleck has, is awesome. And we have this shift when he realizes that his mom didn't call him happy because he's a happy boy, but because she abused him so much, she probably scared him so much that he learned very early on not to make a peep, not to cry, but to remain happy, and maybe nothing bad will happen to him. Maybe his mom won't hurt him. And it's very similar. I like our back and forth pull at Forrest Gump here. When Forrest asks Jenny if his little boy is like him, and he breaks down and cries. And it's this kind of moment where we're realizing that our main characters have this skewed perspective for a reason. And now the audience is in on the reason why they are the way they are.
Yeah, and they can reason through some of their idiocracy or psychosis, right? They're not completely insane where anything goes within them. Arthur and Forrest, Arthur knows he's been wronged. Forrest knows that growing up the way he did, being who he was really hard when he was a kid. He's not just an idiot, right? There's a little more under the hood.
Right. Unlike Salieri, who is so obsessed that he is crazy up until his death in a mental institution.
Yeah, funny enough, he's probably the crazier of the three, and that's because he saw the face of God through Mozart.
Hey, I don't blame him.
How it must feel to think you're in the presence of a God, of a Jesus Christ type figure, and no one else get it. I feel for Salieri, totally.
I don't know if I feel for him. I have two favorite scenes in the movie for different reasons, but my first favorite scene is when he's on the bus and he's interacting with the kid. And there's just so much going on here that it almost depresses me, because there's this very innocent and vulnerable exchange going on between Arthur and this little kid that is completely taken out of context. He's just trying to make this little boy laugh, and he's laughing. He's not scared of him. He's not thinking he's a weirdo. He's not thinking about how he looks or anything like that. It's just a very sweet moment that gets snatched when the mom turns around and she's like, "Hey, quit bothering my kid." And Arthur looks shocked. He's like, no, you don't understand. I'm not bothering your kid. And because he's different and has this condition where he's uncomfortable, he starts laughing. And then it makes everyone uncomfortable. And then it makes the kid uncomfortable. And now this kid has learned that whatever just happened there, whatever that situation was going on, is no longer okay. And he should avoid individuals like this. And then it ends with Arthur handing the mom his card, which I love, by the way. I love that card that he has to hand out to people to explain what's going on because he's not going to stop laughing. And then she looks at him like he's even crazier that he has this card to begin with, that handing it out to people. And that's probably one of the scenes that breaks my heart the most in this movie.
You see it throughout the entire film, obviously, but this is one of the core turns we make into society creating villains. And there does seem to be some kind of defense and almost cry for help wrapped up in this film out of maybe Todd Phillips and friends screaming out at the forced inability to connect and how you're a freak if you want to connect. That there's this unnecessary innate drive to want to divide people, that people should divide themselves. And Arthur handing the mom his little card is terribly sad. It makes me feel like this is Todd's way of asking for consent or maybe forgiveness and allowing one to express themselves and ultimately connect on the most superficial level of just getting a reaction out of someone.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we could all go around handing people cards of our quirks so they were not misunderstood? Like, hey, here's my card that I'm a little frank, so don't take what I say too serious. That's just my tone of voice. I don't know. That would be something. My second favorite scene is towards the end of the movie when he's dyeing his hair. I like what's going on visually, along with the tone it's setting that's very different from the rest of the film. It's the moment when Arthur is accepting his fate, and that song, That's Life, is playing in the background. It's a great choice. He's dancing, and we no longer have the sad tones, but there's more light in the room. There's more going on in the room, and we all feel so liberated.
Arthur found his role on stage. He was finally casted.
I like the plot twist we have in this movie. If you saw it coming, great, kudos to you, but I did not see it coming. And that's when we realized that Sophie, the neighbor, wasn't really with him in these situations. I should have been more clever and caught that because of what's going on, but I didn't. And I'm a fan of movies that do this, that go back and show us these situations they were in, like when they were sitting next to each other in the hospital or when they were standing by each other at the newspaper stand. And they go back and show us these now new perspective where Sophie's not there, and now we get to look at how crazy the situation really is. But I wish we could have gone a little bit harder on these. Maybe not something so simple as sitting down at the hospital or standing at the newspaper stand.
Well, that's sort of the point, though, is that he was fantasizing, almost fetishizing just connecting, just being next to someone.
Normal things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess I'm thinking more of Fight Club and realizing that Tyler doesn't exist. And now we're in these situations where Edward Norton's character, our main character, is fighting with Tyler, but now that we know Tyler doesn't exist, he's fighting with himself and he's punching himself. Like, those kinds of weird situations. I like when those are revealed. But yes, it's very important that in those moments are very normal, maybe not everyday things, but moments of someone being there with you. There's no doubt that this movie is visually stunning, but there's also a lot of movies that are visually stunning that it's no surprise when a movie is visually stunning. But there were some really awesome perspective shots in this movie that I really like. Of course, everyone likes that iconic scene when he's on the stairs, several times actually, but that's probably one of the more memorable ones. and it just looks absolutely amazing. But there was one shot that I particularly liked, and it was when he was kicked to the ground in the beginning of the film. The boys stole his sign, and they kicked him, they beat him up, and he's on the ground. And all of a sudden, we have the camera really low, and it's like we're with him on the ground. And we're just watching him suffer. And it's so striking because he's in this clown getup. So he's very colorful, he's very bright, but everything else around him is not. You have the trash everywhere. The city is very gloomy. There's nothing bright in this city. And it's such a good shot. And I'm sure there's others throughout the film where you can almost pause it and seize up the situation that's going on.
Yeah, this film is beautiful from head to toe. The color grading, a lot of the cinematography is just awesome.
There's not too many props or sets that particularly stand out in this film. It's all very set in reality. Nothing's too whimsical or anything that stands out to me a lot. But I do like his notebook. His notebook is pretty disturbing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff scribbled in there that's just weird and doesn't make sense. And then you have like pictures, I think, of naked women or just nude people. I don't know if it was just women or not. And it's all very disturbing. And there was a line in one of his notebooks that I really enjoyed, and it said, "I hope my death makes more sense than my life." But sense is spelled out CENTS, like money sense. And I just thought that was super clever, super small, and it blew my mind a little bit. I won't lie. And I just loved it. I really love this film. I think there's so much in it that you can break apart and you can spin it into a million things.
No, totally. That's a great line. And I actually think it helps define some of the divide that we find in this film. That being this like corporate cynicism. But I will say one thing I don't love about that point. I guess I'm kind of two minds on it because it obviously lives in Arthur's head that he hopes his death makes more sense, CENTS, more than his life. And that point almost feels specifically for the audience because we know that's a little more prevalent in our world than Arthur's world. We don't see that echoed throughout too much, if at all, in Arthur's world. But classism ultimately is obviously a fundamental divide in our world. But then again, it lives in Arthur's head. It's something that he worries about. It's almost nothing more than a passing aphorism. But there is no doubt something deeply, dreadfully nihilistic and mood setting. Because I think that happens fairly early in the film when he says that.
Yeah, he doesn't say it, but we get a brief pause on it when his therapist is flipping through, or social worker, whatever she is, but she's flipping through his notebook because that's supposed to be his journal that she needs to read for him to get his meds. I did see in an interview that this journal was given to Joaquin Phoenix to write to sort of get this inspiration behind the character. So everything that's in there, he wrote himself, wasn't told what to write or anything. It was just, here's a blank notebook, get inspired.
Yeah, there was no doubt a deep level of simpatico between Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix. And no doubt is this kind of emphasis of embrace of the potential of this type of movie having tethers in a superhero kind of source. That's very cool.
Yeah, and I like this fine line they had to walk humanizing someone so evil like the Joker. Because you don't want to get to a point where you no longer have compassion and empathy for Arthur Fleck. But you want to give enough to have the compassion and empathy you have for him. Deciding the amount of people he was going to kill. Deciding how he was going to kill them. Because one of the saddest deaths is his mom's death. When you really think about it, this is the woman he has been with his whole entire life. He takes care of her. He's probably always lived with her. And she has probably never let him develop any kind of relationship with anyone else. They were very codependent. And he found out she betrayed him by not telling him the truth. She lied to him his whole life. So now that bitch has to go. It's almost like a Gypsy Rose moment where she was also abused. Like the Joker here, I think he was abused by his mom and her boyfriend or husband or whatever at that time. And it's a situation of learning that they're human too.
Sure, and kind of from the same point of view, it feels like there's this misintended defense of people lashing out, maybe in a similar way too.
Yeah.
Which I think we saw a little bit of that when the film came out. We saw cops at different theaters concerned about the effects the film might have on individuals. But it feels much more like a cry for help than a call to action, I guess.
Yeah. That's funny you bring up all the cops and stuff being at movie theaters. Because I thought that was because of that Joker guy. Or supposedly he was dressed up as the Joker. I don't know how true that is. But there was a mass shooting at a movie theater for The Dark Knight. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in this movie. There's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of what the Joker symbolizes. But overall, I just think it's a movie about having some compassion for one another. And that almost gets solidified with Joaquin's acceptance speech at the Oscars.
Well, man, thank you for watching this movie and talking about it here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching this movie again with me.
Do you have a budget guess?
I have no idea how much a film like this costs. It's 2 hours, 2 minutes. I don't know a lot of Todd Phillips films. I definitely haven't seen any besides this. So I'm going with 50 mil. Not sure if that's overkill or not enough.
Well, it says here on the Wikipedia that it was 55 to 70 million.
Oh, okay.
So I feel good about your guess. I hate that range. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid.
Yeah.
To try to quote a range like that. 50 to 60, I guess I can give you a little bit of a pass. Maybe a 10% kind of standard deviation on that.
Yeah. 50 to 55, that's okay.
But it went on to make $1.079 billion.
Ooh, good. I'm happy for that.
So that's cool.
And I feel like that's one of the last movies people went to see before COVID really hit. And then the movie theater was dead.
With 4.24 million people on Letterboxd, they weighed in at a 3.8.
Not bad.
Very high. Very respectable.
I'm giving this a 4.
I want to ask, were you a 4 or more the first time you saw it? Was it higher? And now that you've let it simmer in you, you've kind of let Joaquin's performance kind of, wash off you a little bit, because it's a very powerful thing, I think, and they capture him so cleanly, man. Well, he's not clean, but it's greatly over exaggerated in the best way possible, and I can see this being a little breathtaking at first glance.
Honestly, I think it's higher for me than it was the first time I saw it. Like I said, I've grown so much in not being completely bored by a movie and learning to appreciate a lot of the detail behind a movie. And yes, this is my favorite Joaquin movie, but this was also my first Joaquin Phoenix movie. So now I need to really see him in different things. Now I've seen him in Napoleon. I've seen him in Beau is Afraid. Finding out he's the voice in Brother Bear, sort of making me appreciate him a little bit more. But it's also being more awake in a film, knowing a little bit more of the world after seeing that new or relatively new Netflix show Eric, now I know more about sanitation strikes. Not that it's a very informative show, but kind of puts me in the tone of what happened during those strikes, how people felt, how chaotic it was. Whereas initially watching this film, I didn't really know what they were, didn't pay attention to.
Sure. It puts things into
strikes.
perspective. And it makes those kind of strikes feel much more real than the writers' strike we just got through last year.
Yeah, for sure.
Or like the port strike that was just getting going.
Yeah.
They're much more real, substantial, consequential, potential problems.
No, for sure. And really just appreciating a movie is a bit more natural for me now. But there's no doubt that I was awed immediately after the first time I watched this movie. Not truly appreciating what an unreliable character is, or what that could mean, and the different types of unreliable characters there are in film. I'm curious to know what your score is.
Yeah, watching a bunch of movies is kind of like coming face to face with a bunch of locked doors. Sometimes crazier locks than others, maybe. But you find keys along the way to open these doors, and it helps you better understand the intent and meaning and messaging and the potential, right? And the connective tissue and just the cool factor, right?
Yeah.
How easy is it to lose sight that Salieri is this crazy, unreliable character? It's super easy.
Oh, yeah.
You got to keep in the back of your mind. You got to build this muscle to remind you that, what's happening is really awesome, actually. Because imagine watching Amadeus without any of the Salieri context, right?
Yeah.
It'd be like, what is this?
Why do I care?
Yeah, I think Joker is a solid 3.5. I was probably more on the 4 side back in the day, because performance is so hard to get past sometimes for me. I guess going both ways. Sometimes it's a little too bad, and sometimes it's just all I can look at in a film.
Yeah.
Especially when you have great cinematography. But a 3.5 is a comfortable score, I think, for Joker. Well, man, thank you again. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Monday and Friday with brand new episodes of The Filmistines on all of our free feeds, and every other Wednesday on patreon.com/filmistines for Patreon exclusive episodes. Our next free episode will be on the Joker sequel. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Me too.
I think this is a great example of, do we need a sequel to the first Joker? I don't know.
There's a lot of movies that you could do that with. And then they get crazy, and then all of a sudden you have Despicable Me 4, and you're like, what?
That's fair. Although I could have seen a sequel out of Despicable Me, which we saw a bunch. But the first one happening, and then the second one just embracing the family thing, and then that's it. But we ran in a few different avenues, and things got weird, yeah. That's fair. I guess I'm thinking from the point of great movies that really don't leave anything open. And they don't really ponder the next question.
Right.
Because this kind of starts and ends on this expose of society creates villains. And we just wrap it up there. Is it a call to action or a cry for help? I guess that's for you to decide. But please look forward to our Joker 2 talk. I very much look forward to seeing that. I'm very curious how Lady Gaga's gonna be in that. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Go rate us on Apple Podcasts. Come subscribe to our YouTube as well. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives in the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon, at patreon.com/filmistines. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is The Filmistines, signing off.